Hello and welcome to the Epitome. I'm your host, Nathan Bozeman, and today's video is going to be just a little bit different. I did a video with my friend Adam over at Curious Christianity, and it was an idea that was really unique. It was called Apologetics Sparring, and he DM'd me about it on Twitter, and I thought the idea was just hilarious and like a really good and unique and creative idea. And so I said, let's do it. So hope you enjoy this conversation. I'll be sure to leave a link to his channel and this video in the description below. And without further ado, let's hop right into apologetic sparring. And I'll be back at the end with a message for you as well.
Welcome to Curious Christianity. Today I have a very special guest, the man, the myth, the legend, Nathan Bozeman, who has been a arguer and debater on Twitter, and this is how I have run into him, arguing and defending theism. So Nathan, welcome to the channel.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. I don't know if you want me to intro. I'm Nathan. I'm a radio host. I'm a debater on Twitter, as I've been dubbed. Yeah, I got on into apologetics maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago. And I did it through reading Mere Christianity by C.S. Lewis. And I remember I read his moral argument, and I believe it's like chapter 1 or 2. And I was, first of all, just taken aback. And I was like, wow, I never have heard someone argue for God's existence through moral knowledge before. That was really cool. And then I thought to myself, whatever he just did, I want to do that. And so I just started reading a bunch of books, and I found, this really cool, like, microcosm of theists and atheists on Twitter. And like, that's like pretty much all of my followers now. And yeah, it's been a lot of fun.
And that's how I ran into you.
Yeah, pretty much.
So today we have a very special event. I'm planning to do some sparring with Nathan. So we will get to see Nathan be the atheist, and we'll also get to see me play the atheist. And I've actually long looked forward to trying to do a video like this where we could see some live sparring between two Christians, partially also because hopefully I am looking for Nathan to provide answers for theism and explain that, because one time I was in a philosophy class and I was put on the atheist side, and I crushed Christianity.
Yeah.
And so a couple of my friends were like, oh, it would have been nice for you to be on the Christian side so people could hear the answers. So
Yeah.
Nathan, we are relying on you for the answers to defend Christianity. Lots of pressure, buddy.
No pressure. Yeah. I think I got this, man. So what do you want to start on, I guess?
Yeah. So I'm going to set up a couple things here, though. So one, I'm going to set a max timer for 20 minutes on any particular argument. So we will rotate. We can end earlier than that, but we'll wrap up if we're hitting right around 20 either way. So that's the plan. So we have 4 topics that we have laid out. A couple things to note here. I want everyone to be able to see how a conversation goes. Nathan and I have not rehearsed this. The only thing that we have agreed on were the topics that we're going to talk about. So the topics we have picked out were show me the evidence. There's so much disagreement and infighting in the church, church abuses, miracles, and lastly, both Nathan and I were going to talk a little bit about the problem of evil. So for the first one, I believe
I will say this real quick.
Yes.
I've gone against like my entire nature. I'm such a preparer and like a perfectionist. I like to have everything planned, and you were like, I want this to just be off the cuff. And so I had to like essentially tie my hands with a zip tie yesterday to not prepare for this. So it's completely off the cuff today. Let's do it.
Yeah. Well, and so I decided I kind of wanted to do it a little more off the cuff because I wanted these conversations we're going to have to represent a little bit more of your coffee house interaction or connection with atheist, right? There's a significant, there you go. See, he's already ready.
I'm role playing.
There you go. Right. So, and this is for other believers to see. It's like, okay, so Nathan, you've been studying for about a year to 2 years, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is exactly partially like, okay, what can you accomplish in a couple years of apologetics? Right. And yeah, can you defend theism without like, okay, writing a book right beforehand?
Yeah, that's
So
true.
yeah, so I just want people to see that. And also, yeah, hopefully there'll be no yelling and screaming. So don't hurt me, Nathan.
I promise I won't do friendly fire. But
So
when you're role
yeah.
playing an atheist, I don't know. I might, get a little mean.
Yeah, there's definitely been some some tougher ones or more
Twitter can
hateful
get
ones.
crazy, man. Okay. Anyways,
Yeah, yeah, no, it
that's another
definitely
story
can.
for another day. But yeah, I've had to sometimes just be like, I have to get off this app. I cannot handle these responses right now. So I'll try not to go off on you, man.
No, 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 we should be good. All right, so first you'll be playing the Christian role for show me the evidence, and I'll have the atheist role, right?
Okay.
And
Do you want to
then
start or you want me to start?
yeah, yeah, I'll start because this is typically the atheist opener. So, and
There's
also,
so much evidence for God, and then you're gonna come in and be like,
yeah, yeah. Well, and I'll tell you that yeah, this video for those of the atheist watchers, this is not meant at all to be an all comprehensive video. Because I
yeah,
already can hear the objections to just like, yeah, but you didn't cover X, Y, and Z. It's like, all right, these are short videos. So,
yeah.
okay. So, you ready, Nathan?
Yes, I
Let's
am
get
going to say
started.
that there's so much evidence for God, Adam. So
Yeah,
much.
there is no evidence for God. Just as long as you demonstrate the evidence to me, then I'll be convinced. Okay?
So what do you mean by evidence? Because I think you're asking me for proof, not evidence.
No, no,
Am
no,
I
no.
getting that
Just
right?
just anything. Anything that would show that God exists. Anything that would demonstrate to me that God exists. If you
Okay.
can give me some sort of evidence, then maybe I would actually be compelled. But without any evidence, no, I'm not going to believe in God.
Okay, so let's slow down for a moment and let's try to define our terms a little bit. So there are proofs and there is evidence. I don't think anyone can say that they've proved with 100% certainty that God exists. But if me as an apologist, if I look at the word apologia in the Greek, it literally means a reasoned defense and it's a legal term. And so
Okay.
if I think about that, basically let's picture we're in a courtroom for a moment and Christianity is like my client.
Mm-hmm.
All I am agreeing to as an apologist is to say that I'm going to have a reasonable defense of Christianity. I'm not going to tell you that I'm proving it with 100% certainty. And in the same way that I don't have to have 100% proof that said person committed a murder, so to speak, I don't have to have 100% definitive proof that
Sure.
Christianity is true. I just
Yeah.
need to have clues that show us. In the same way, like let's say I was in a murder trial and we have a dead woman on our hands and
Mm-hmm.
we see that her body was found in the woods, right? And this is
Mm-hmm.
nowhere near civilization. And then we track people's phones and we see, oh wait, her husband, his phone was right around there, right after she disappeared. We have evidence based on what we have to think like, okay, the husband probably did this. And based on most murders, we know that most of the time it's someone that's close to the victim. And so there's lots of reasons to think that it was the husband. And so that would be evidence, even though we don't have proof. No one saw him do it. So in the same way, I would say that we have evidence for a God, but we don't have proof
Yeah, and I
of
would
God.
say no, you don't have any evidence. So,
Okay.
and your analogy
Well,
isn't anywhere close because they're completely disanalogous. I understand murders and people, but God is not even in the same category.
okay, so you could say they're disanalogous, but I think what all we're, as an apologist, all we're trying to say is that we have reasons that point to a God. So let me give you an example. Let's think about the fact that the universe began to exist, for example. The leading theory in science is the Big Bang Theory, which
Mm-hmm.
shows that the universe began at a singularity. And so if if the universe exists and it didn't exist at some point, it's an absurdity to say that it began from nothing. And so this is just one thing of many that we could say points to some sort of supernatural cause.
That's an assumption you're making. There's no reason to posit a supernatural cause here, right? Simply to say that the universe came into existence and that therefore God did it, like that doesn't mean anything. Like that you're just making a complete bald assertion that there has to be something beyond the natural.
Well, let's think about this. If what a singularity means, and scientists would agree with me here that uh, matter, time, space, energy, all these things came into existence at the moment of the singularity. And so we're not just saying that there has to be a supernatural cause. We're saying that there wasn't a natural cause present to bring forth
Okay,
the
but
universe.
I mean, are you really saying that therefore you've proven that all of the oscillating universal models are false? Like the idea that the universe doesn't constantly go through singularities, expanding and exploding and recontracting, so that there actually is an infinite universe?
Well, oscillating universes, there's first of all no evidence that universes can go inflate and then deflate. Actually, some scientists have concluded that it's impossible for that to happen because the universe will never obtain enough density for it to collapse back on itself. And second of all, even if it did, there's no reason to believe that once it collapsed on itself that it would expand again. Like what kind of invisible physical law are we talking about here? Like what reason should I believe that that's the case?
Well, it just seems that I can wrap my head around that. That seems plausible and possible. So, as long as it seems possible, it seems much more possible than your God simply positing that, oh, God exists and he created everything from nothing. Like,
How about the second law of thermodynamics, which is otherwise known as the law of entropy, which says that we have a set amount of energy and it's slowly decreasing over time, and eventually the universe will run out of energy and have a heat death. And this applies to oscillating universes. It doesn't just apply to one universe. If the universe was oscillating, the entropy would not reset upon collapsing and expanding. And so, if the universe has been here for an infinity amount of time, then there would be no energy left in the universe, and you and I would not be here to discuss this topic right here.
okay, but aren't you saying that the energy has to be created at some point, right? Or it has to come into being at some point, right?
Well, yeah, the singularity, all of that came into being. There was nothing before that. And so we, as theists, posit that it was a supernatural cause because if nature didn't exist and the natural laws didn't exist, then there has to be something above nature, which is what supernatural means by definition.
Right, right, right. I mean, supernatural does mean that by definition, but why couldn't it simply be that it's a mystery? Like this is not necessarily evidence for theism. It's merely a mystery of science. Like there are a lot of things we didn't know that the universe came into being in the past, but we could know, right? So there doesn't seem like there is any evidence for God's existence then.
Well, I would disagree with you there. I think that you could say that this is positive evidence for theism. I think you can maybe say like you could try to think your way around it. You can try to get around the fact that we need some sort of supernatural cause. You could try to posit an infinite universe, but I think that just flies in the face of scientific evidence, the second law of thermodynamics, and there's no you can't say that you're going off the evidence. I think a big thing is you're saying show me the evidence,
Yeah,
but
show me the evidence.
you have no evidence for an oscillating universe. You have no evidence for a cause that isn't physical and isn't based on the laws of physics, and so you're not going off the evidence either if we're playing this game.
Well, there's just nobody has any evidence, right? Pointing out that I don't have any evidence doesn't mean that you do. You
sure but
can't just
you
say that you win by de facto.
Sure, but you hold beliefs, don't you? Like you can't just deny that God exists without affirming the fact that God does not exist. So you also have a belief and you're doing it off of faith and not off of evidence. I'm doing the same thing.
Well, yeah, so you admit that you don't have any evidence. You just believe on faith, right?
Well, though I would say this is evidence for God, and there's reasons to believe that the beginning of the universe had to be a personal being because before the universe began, there was a timeless state, and a timeless state entails that there's no change that is possible. And if change isn't possible, then there can't be a natural cause because what changed the natural state if nothing else existed and time didn't exist? However, if we have a timeless being who can make choices, so for example, I'm choosing to pick up this cup right now. I could have left it there or I could have picked it up.
Mm-hmm.
I'm an agent. And in the same way, at the beginning of the universe, we need some sort of agent to start everything to be the beginning of the change. And I don't see any reason to believe that nature could have been in some timeless state when we have no evidence for matter or anything else existing timelessly. And if we have some sort of agent, that to me makes way more sense to think that agent made a decision.
Yeah, I mean, but just saying, like, okay, we don't have evidence for this scientifically, you don't have evidence for it theistically. then it's just a wash. Like there is no evidence on either side, right?
I wouldn't I wouldn't say there's no evidence. I would just say that there's reason to believe that a god did it, and there's not very much reason to believe that it was a natural cause. And then I would go on to say that there's other reasons too. This is known as the cosmological argument, but what about the teleological argument? What about the fact that there's so much design in the universe? What about the fact that if the law of gravity, for example, if the force of gravity was changed by even 1 over 10 to the 40th power, we would not exist? Or what about if the force between electrons was changed by even a hair's width? I believe it's 1 over 10 to the 60th power. I want to say I could be a little off on that one, but if it was changed even slightly, then chemistry couldn't happen and we couldn't exist and carbon couldn't form and things like this. So I just how does an atheist explain the fine tuning of the universe?
I mean, again, you're putting the burden on me to needing to explain my like views and my belief system, right? But
Well, a
simply,
scientist once said that it appears that a supermind or a super intellect has monkeyed with the laws of physics because of how precise they all are. And so there's only three explanations that could explain the design of the universe. It's either by necessity, so you have to say that either the universe had to be this way, it couldn't be any other way, or by
Mhm.
chance that we just won the cosmic lottery somehow. And I'm not talking about like 1 in a million chance. I'm talking like one in like a trillion chance, and maybe even more than that. Or God designed it. And I think it doesn't make any sense to think that the universe had to be this way. It clearly could have been otherwise. There's lots of contingencies in the world that could have been different. There could be more coffee in my cup right now, for example, if I didn't take a sip of it 5 minutes ago. That's something that could have been different, right? And this, I don't see any reason to believe that the universe is any different than that. That it had to be the way that it is.
Why couldn't it have just been aliens or another life form that created and organized this and not some sort of supernatural god being?
Well, you're just taking the same problem and moving it back one step. Like,
Well, yeah, because
where did the
it
aliens come from? Like, it's the same problem. Where did they
yeah,
come
yeah,
from?
exactly, right? But it's that's exactly the point, right? Is that there isn't like one like, oh, it has to lead this way. It could be this way or it could be this way, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's not you're not really leading anywhere in particular. You're just saying like, well, we don't really know, so therefore input got input. And so you're just claiming that
Well,
your explanation is better when really it's no different than any other explanation.
well, that's not true at all. I think we can notice design. Like if you look at Mount Rushmore, for example, you know that nature didn't cause those faces to show up on the mountain. Like I can,
Sure, sure.
or
Right?
the camera that we're talking into, or wait, we're supposed to be in a coffee shop,
Yeah.
or this coffee shop that we're in right now. Like, uh, clearly someone designed this. This didn't just show up. Or the classic
Right, but
watchmaker
well,
argument.
why isn't it just created by aliens? Like that
Well,
seems just as plausible, if not more plausible, because at least I understand the concept of aliens. But God is a completely new concept, supernatural, completely outside of anything in the known universe, and so therefore less probable than aliens,
well,
right? So
Well,
it's
it's
not
actually
really
not. It's actually not. So, first of all, these aliens would have to have some sort of supernatural power, even if they existed, because they're creating universes, like, and they're creating universes that create sentient life. Like that is not just any type of alien. You're
why can't they
talking
just be
about some
natural
supernatural,
power?
because nature didn't exist before this, so it has to be by definition supernatural, right? So that's what supernatural means, above nature. If they have the ability to form natural causes, then clearly they are supernatural in some sort. And so you're just moving it back. Also, we should also point to the fact that you wouldn't be believing that based on evidence. There's no evidence for aliens that can create universes. Like, so to say that um you would, it's just as rational to believe that, is it makes no sense.
I don't know. Like, and you keep
Or what
asserting
about
that it
moral,
has to be supernatural.
or what about moral knowledge? Why does it make any sense for us to have morals and to have universally accepted morals, not even just like subjective morals? There are things that are universally recognized. Like no one is praised for being a coward. No one is praised for stealing from their parents. No one in the world is praised for cheating on their significant other. These are universally recognizable moral laws.
Now that's a just a bald assertion. There are no universal morals. Morals are
That's
nothing but
not true.
social constructs that exist inside of human beings. Human beings are purely biological evolutionary creatures that have generated these ideas of morals for various reasons, but they're nothing more than evolutionary constructs.
Well, here's something we can get to later as well, that you are asserting that we are evolutionary beings and that everything is natural, but you actually can't believe those things simultaneously in a rational manner. We'll get to that later, but before we get to that, let's stay on moral epistemology here. So there actually are universally recognizable morals. There's a book called The Righteous Mind by Jonathan Haidt. He's a moral psychologist. That's what he's
Okay.
dedicated his whole life to. And he says there are six universally recognizable moral categories. Whenever these six things are brought up, no matter where you are in the world, they are considered moral questions. And so we actually do have objective,
Give me an example of
universal
one. Give me an
one,
example of
the
one moral universal.
being fair. Everyone in the world, doesn't matter where you are, people believe that you should be fair, that you should treat people fairly. And then another one is what's called liberty or freedom versus oppression. People think it's bad to be oppressors, and people think it's good to be free. There's another one that is people think it is bad to um, to to I'm blanking here on the third one,
Okay,
but
but
you get what I'm saying, though.
these morals don't exist if humans don't exist, right? So therefore, morality is a social construct.
Well, okay, let's slow down there for a minute. So you said morals don't exist unless people exist.
Yeah,
Is that what you're saying?
yeah.
Okay,
Mhm.
well, so what makes you think that? Let me ask you that.
Because all morals only have to do with like people. You're talking about like you're talking about like the idea of we all believe these morals, right? But
Mm-hmm.
we only believe the morals
Sure.
because we think that they're fair, right? Or we think they're so if we aren't around to think those things, then there is no fairness. There is nothing else. It's only the matter of us being, being
Well,
like this.
well, I would agree that that morals are a property of persons, but then this doesn't help you at all because you have to ask, where did it come from? Like there has to be some sort of grounding for them. And if morals are a property of persons, wouldn't that kind of point to the fact that at a fundamental level, our existence has personhood there?
Well, sure, right. But personhood
Well,
is
wouldn't that
like a no, it's a property that emerges from the brain.
well, it can't emerge from the brain and be a fundamental property of the universe. It has to be one or the other.
Well, no, yeah, it's not a fundamental property of the universe. It's just a fundamental property of the brain
Well,
or of
if
humans,
if we live
people.
in a moral producing universe that are objective, once again, they're universally accepted. These are
Well, I
not.
don't accept that they're objective. They're only objective. They're subjective to humans because if you remove the humans, then there goes the objectivity.
Well, once again, if the fundament of reality is personal, then they would not be only if we're here, right? Because God is a necessary being and a person would still be the objective value or standard for goodness. And so goodness would still exist. If nothing else existed besides God, evil wouldn't exist, but good would still exist.
So you're saying
Um,
good would exist without human beings?
yeah, evil wouldn't exist though, unless you're talking about natural evil, if the universe exists. But if you're talking about moral evil, which is what we're talking
Mm-hmm.
about, that moral goodness can exist independent from us, but evil cannot because we're fallen creatures. So we introduce moral evil into the world.
So you're saying that humans introduced moral evil into the world?
Sure, at the fall of man, you could argue that Satan before that, there's the story about how Satan was cast out of heaven. I'm sure as someone who lives in America, you've heard the story. Um,
Yep.
so he would have introduced moral evil, I guess, before humans existed. But if we're talking about moral evil on Earth, yeah, it was originated by humans. But goodness preceded that because evil cannot exist without good, but goodness can exist without evil.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I sort of get that. I mean, because what is evil, right? You're just saying that
Yes.
evil is like the privation of good.
Yeah. And if there's gradations of good, then it follows that there's a standard too. Like
But
we know
isn't
that
it? Yeah, isn't it just that
we
humans are the ones that create all of the good?
well, no, because we recognize that there are gradations beyond ourselves of good and evil. Like, for example, it is better to give someone a house that is homeless, I guess, than it is to give someone that is your friend and is super rich $5, right? We understand that the first one is more morally good than the other one, and because there is gradations, we have to recognize that there's some sort of standard that we have knowledge of, even if we don't know how we have knowledge of it. We have to recognize that there's something beyond us. It's not purely subjective. If we can all recognize that without having to have some sort of rational argument for it. There are
Gotcha,
some things
gotcha.
we just know. There's a book that's called Things We Can't Not Know. That's one of those things we can't not know. And so that would be one of those things where it shows. And then back to the thing I said earlier where it says, where I said that you can't even believe naturalism and evolution rationally at once. And so like your position that you're positing about believing in evolution and believing that everything is natural, you can't hold those two rationally at the same time, because if we're simply the products of evolution, all of your beliefs are aimed at survival and reproduction and not truth. And so you have no reason to believe that your beliefs are true. And so you can't even hold your position rationally. There's no way to believe those two things at the same time. And so I don't know. I think if we want to pick which one we should believe, whose evidence we should believe, I think we should pick the one that can actually hold rationally their beliefs and not the one that can't.
Great. Thanks. Let's yeah, no, there's like literally we just went through our 20 minutes. So
Oh, there we go.
yeah, yeah, like it's goes pretty quick. Goes pretty quick. Cool
How'd
deal.
I do? Did I defend theism? Did I do you want to pray the salvation prayer real quick?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I don't know, man. You might need some more work here. A little more reading Greg Cookle's tactics book, and then some Tom. No, I
Yeah,
don't
yeah,
know.
yeah.
Yeah,
Dude,
yeah,
Tactics is a good book, by the way.
yeah.
All right. Anyways, what's the second topic?
There's so much disagreeing and infighting in theism.
Oh yeah, I'm the atheist on this one. All right. I'm gonna put on my atheist glasses real quick.
There you
All right.
go.
Man, I have no idea why I would become a Christian. Like, you guys don't agree on anything. Like, some of you guys think that there's free will, and then there's Calvinists that don't think that you have free will. And then there are some Calvinists that are compatibilists and think that sometimes you have free will when you're doing evil. You've
Mhm.
got, I just saw this video the other day. It was just popped up in my recommended feed. This guy named Gavin Ortland. I don't know if you've ever heard of him.
Mhm.
He was talking about venerating icons, and there are people that are just responding to his video, lashing out at him, and they're all talking about how it's a perfectly valid practice, and he's saying it's idolatry. So why the heck would I join a religion where you guys don't even know what you think?
That's a really great question, and I think that it's really important to to recognize that there are a wide diversity of beliefs, not because there isn't an absolute truth there, but because people are different, and also people are at different maturity ranges and ages and everything like that. So let me use an illustration to try and help you understand a little more. Um, Today, you're older than you were 10 years ago, right?
I think so.
Yep.
Unless I could take the hard skeptical approach that there's no self, but I won't go there right
Yeah,
now.
yeah, yeah.
Never mind. So yeah,
But
I would
essentially
say that
you're
I
older.
would say I'm older than I was 10 years ago. Yeah.
Would you say that you've changed your thoughts or beliefs about things in these last 10 years?
I think I was right the whole time, but yeah.
Yeah, 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 right? Let's say from the time you were 5 years old, right? You've changed some of your thoughts and beliefs since you were five till now.
Sure. Sure. Yeah. I had a lot of erroneous beliefs when I was 5, I'm sure.
Yeah, yeah. So here's the thing is that let's look at a pastor from a church, right? And he's
Okay.
60 years old and he's grown up in the church and he's been studying and doing all this church related stuff and Bible study for 40 years, right? Let's say he
Okay.
started when he was 20.
Sure.
And now we have a fresh new pastor who is 25 years old, just got out of school, and he's been studying for 5 years.
Okay.
Do you think there'll be some differences between their beliefs?
I'm sure there would be, but I think that it is. I think what we need to realize here is that the Bible has been around for 2,000 years, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't see any reason why there isn't like one tradition that's been passed down over time. Why is there so much schisms within belief? Like, why can't you guys agree? Like, there's even some guys that believe God used to be a person and now he's God and we're going to be gods one day.
Mm-hmm.
And there are people that believe like that, there that you have to baptize babies. And then there are other people that say that's wrong.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah, for sure.
why can't we agree on such things? Like the Bible, it's one book. Like we don't read, for example, Mere Christianity and then argue about what C.S. Lewis was saying. Like why can two people read the Bible and come to such different conclusions? That doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, I definitely hear that. Now, I think that one of the major things is that the core tenets of the gospel and Christianity, they are present amongst multiple different people groups.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea that Jesus is the Messiah is pretty clear. Now, concerning the idea that there are many differences amongst different peoples and the difference between the Bible and mere Christianity, I think there's a significant difference between the Bible and mere Christianity. Mere
Oh yeah, and what's
Christianity,
that?
well, one of the things I think that's significantly different is that Mere Christianity is simply a book and it gives you a whole bunch of information, but I don't think that it's as demanding as the Bible is in many ways. The Bible confronts
Wait,
people.
wait, 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 wait. Dude, C.S. Lewis was like really smart, and people that wrote the
Yeah.
Bible were not, dude. Like most of those guys were basically illiterate in the Jewish culture, right? Like they were.
Yeah.
So
No, and
what do you mean that the Bible's harder?
yeah, this is actually, I think, a perfect illustration because I think the major problem with the Bible is not the intellectual difficulty of it, but
Hmm.
rather it's so much more of the moral difficulties because
Okay.
it's so much more of the teachings and the commands of Jesus when Jesus is commanding and asking people to follow him. That is a very different challenge than the intellectual challenges that C.S. Lewis poses. Right? So
Okay.
C.S. Lewis in Mere Christianity, he poses several intellectual challenges. Like, oh, how can there be so much evil? How can there be so much good? Like, how can there, how can we deal with all these different moral problems? The Bible doesn't pose these same kind of challenges. It poses very moral challenges. Now,
Like
that's one
what?
of the primary reasons. Oh, moral challenges such as following Jesus, right? Jesus
Hmm.
says, hey, you need to give up your life and follow me, right? You
Hmm.
need to love God and love each other. Now, while those
Okay.
may seem uncontroversial to some of the challenges of actually carrying those things out, um, that's probably one things that I think changes a lot of people and leads people to different directions. So I'll give you this kind of quote. One of my pastors, he used to say, he says that morality leads theology. And that is that, sometimes people end up choosing roads that go along best with what they think and feel on the inside and not necessarily
Okay.
just willing to accept what does the Bible say. Oh, I'm willing to accept that and therefore I'll believe it.
Hmm.
So I think that there's a vast difference amongst different church groups, different people groups, not based on, oh, because the Bible says this, but
Hmm.
part of it is because everyone has their own opinion and perspective. And one of the other parts has to do with just maturity. People are growing, and I think people's opinions and perspectives, they'll change over time and conform to being more like God's opinions and more what the Bible says. Um, but lastly,
Well, what
yeah,
about?
the core tenets of Scripture, I think a lot of those pieces, they are agreed upon. They are agreed
Okay.
upon that Jesus is the Messiah. They are agreed upon that there is one God. They are agreed upon that God does miracles and that he performs miracles, that he created the universe. So I don't think
Well,
there's as much diversity as you might think.
don't Mormons think that there's like God used to be a person like us and they're going to be gods one day? They don't believe in one God.
That's true. But I will be honest in saying that I don't think Mormons actually fit into what's traditionally considered Christian. Now,
Really?
Yes, yes, because for exactly some of those reasons, they don't believe, and they have far more than just the Bible, right? So I do think it's worth mentioning, right? Let's take, yeah, Mormons, Catholics, and Protestants, right?
Hmm.
Now, here's something significant. You can say it's like, well, don't they believe different things? Yes, they do.
Yeah.
But we're not all functioning on the same books in this case, right?
Hmm.
The Catholics do have the apocryphal books, and the
Hmm.
Mormons do have the Book of Mormon, the Pearl of Great Price, and the Doctrines and Covenants. And the Mormons believe in abrogation, meaning that the newer writings of Joseph Smith, well, they overthrow the old writings of the New Testament and the Old Testament and things like this. So,
Okay, so don't they consider themselves Christians though? Like, wouldn't they say that we are believers in Jesus and
yes,
stuff?
they would say that.
Hmm.
But that's not traditionally been held as by probably most Christians that the Mormons are in the same camp as regular Christians because all of the major core doctrines are completely different. Who Jesus
Okay.
was, the virgin birth is different, um, inspiration of scripture. They actually don't even have the exact same Bible that we do. So I wouldn't put these in the same camp. And especially since you're talking about the Bible and you want people to look the same, well, then you should only compare people as being the same when they're reading the same books. I
Okay.
don't,
Well, what about all the infighting stuff about like, let's just say, because a lot of these guys that are arguing are like, they have doctorates and different things like that on even that video I was talking about, the veneration of icons. Like Gavin Ortland has a PhD, and so does Jimmy Akin and some of these guys that are, defending against his claims. And so, how can people be so informed about the Bible and have, because you were saying that it's mostly because some people are younger in their walk, some people are older, and as they grow they should kind of have solidified beliefs, but these guys tend to disagree even though they are both pretty far in their walk with God. How does that work?
you're talking about Gavin Ortland, who primarily argues between Protestantism and Catholicism, right?
Yeah, that's a lot of what his channel does. I think I
Yeah.
watched that one video.
So, but Catholics and Protestants, they don't simply only hold to the Bible, right? So it's really not difficult to see the difference in why Catholics would have different opinions and views because they also hold church authority and ecumenical councils as being authoritative when Protestants don't. So it's
But i
not really
thought i
difficult
thought
to see the
Christianity was all
difference.
about the Bible. That's what I've always been told.
Not in Catholicism. That's incorrect to think that it only is about the Bible in Catholicism. They also hold the church. The churches has its own authority outside of the Bible,
Well, how
and there.
does
You know,
does the church disagree with the Bible, or do they? What would they say?
well, the church would say that in the Catholic Church, they would say that they're the only ones that can truly interpret the Bible and Scripture.
Okay.
So they don't think that the individual can do it for themselves. Now, the Protestants don't. They believe that it is up to each individual to interpret the Bible correctly and to see it for what it is. So,
See, this is one of those things where it's like, who do I believe? Like, if I were to even become a Christian right now,
mhm.
which one should I believe? That isn't like that seems like a pretty big disagreement to say like,
Yeah.
oh, I can interpret the Bible or I can't. Which one is it?
Yeah, yeah. No, I think that that's actually one of the best questions possible, right? And I think one of the great answers is that the person that you should go to for the truth is Jesus himself.
Okay.
You shouldn't put your trust and reliability in just the words of individuals,
Hmm.
right? I mean, just saying like, oh yeah, yeah. I think who do I believe? Who do I believe on earth? Do I believe the Catholic Church? Do I believe the Protestants? Do I believe Gavin Ortland? Do I just follow
Hmm.
him? That is the recipe for the cult leader, right? When you want to go to one
Ortlandian.
individual, yeah, yeah. We'll
Oh,
start a new one.
I'm gonna join the Ortlandian church.
I'm just envisioning Gavin fighting about his own own religion that started up and be like, what happened? Like,
Gavin, if you ever see this, I'm a huge fan. You're the best. All right, back to atheist mode.
yeah. So anyway, look, you don't believe in following cults, do you?
I don't know. I think that we should just follow
Why
the
not?
evidence where it leads. And
Yeah, yeah, exactly, right? Why don't you just believe that we should follow one monolithic human leader?
well, normally that doesn't go too well if we look at like, the 1940s and stuff like that, and the World War II and Maoist China. Like it normally doesn't go too well when you follow one leader. So I think that we should just kind of be individuals.
Okay, if you believe that we should be individuals, then you should go to the place where the truth is at, right?
Okay, and where would that be?
It would be in the Bible and with God Himself.
But didn't you just say that other people believe that the church is also a source of truth?
Yeah, but I'll be honest. I'm a Protestant, so I'm not Catholic. I'm afraid I don't agree with that in the
Okay.
in one sense.
Okay, well, this is my problem here is there's so many disagreements on like
Hmm.
really big problems. Like, how do I know if I should just go to the Catholic Church, and how do I know if I should just read the Bible? Like, what? How do I get that information? Who's right?
God is right. The
God is
person
right.
that's right is God, right? So
Okay.
the only place that you can go to for truth then is God Himself, right? The fact that humans disagree on matters doesn't mean that there isn't truth,
Mm-hmm.
right? It means that there is truth, and that if you want to go to find the truth, then you need to go to the source of the truth itself,
Mm-hmm.
and not just follow one human's interpretation or another human's interpretation. You should use your reason to assess what people are saying, but ultimately the only place you can go for the ultimate truth is God Himself.
Okay, and you would say that that's in the Bible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that, and you should talk to Him in prayer. I would not leave
Okay.
out prayers as a part of your journey.
Okay. Well, tell you what, I'll try reading the Bible and I'll see if I can come to these different conclusions. But I will tell you, I'm still skeptical about this. Like, I don't know why there's so much infighting. This doesn't make sense to me. It seems like that book's been around for 2,000 years. You guys should have it down by now. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But I'll tell you what, I'll give it a shot and I'll see what happens.
That sounds good.
How'd I do?
You did fine. Did fine. That was fun.
How long was that one? I want to know, I guess, more of that.
Yeah, probably closer to 10 minutes. Yeah, about
10
10
minutes.
minutes. Yeah, yeah, not too
You're
bad.
more persistent than me, I think.
Well, yeah, yeah. I'm I don't know. I'm pretty familiar with atheism, so
Yeah, I've heard a lot of people just say kind of like you guys disagree on everything. I shouldn't believe, and then I'm just like I kind of say the same things as you. I'm like, well, people are fallible. We're not infallible. So I mean, just because the Bible's infallible doesn't mean that we are. So uh, we don't necessarily have to believe all the same things. So I'm not committed to the belief that all Christians should agree. I'm committed to the belief that Jesus died for me. you know, so
yeah.
um, so yeah. Anyways, what's the third topic?
Church abuses.
Ooh, this should be fun.
I'm
All
nervous
right,
now.
atheist mode. This
No,
one will be fun
I
because honestly, I've gone to really good churches my whole life. So I'm not as familiar with church abuses, but I'm going to do my best to defend against it.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, good luck. I picked you for this one for a reason.
Yeah.
So, yes, Nathan, look, I don't think that Christianity or Jesus or any of this stuff does any good, because it's so obvious. There are so many church abuses, sex scandals. I mean, yeah, of course, we've had the Catholic priests for many years, but not only that, we've also had the most recent Christian apologist, Ravi Zacharias, right? So
Yeah.
you're an apologist, you're defending Christianity, but he has been like unbelievably abusing lots of people. And like that almost just seems like in and of itself a one shot knockout for Christianity. It can't be
And
true.
okay, well, let's think for a second. Does the fallibility of believers entail the non-existence of God?
Maybe there's a God out there, but this doesn't seem like it does anyone any good. Like it seems like the best thing for people is to stay away from religion because it just makes them into terrible people.
Well, I'll say this that sociology and different experiments recently have shown that that's actually not the case. A lot of papers have come out in the last few years. You can look them up where they say that actually belief in Christianity actually shows good for the world. If you There's a YouTube channel I love called Inspiring Philosophy. If you check out his videos, he has a lot of great content to push you towards understanding how Christianity is actually a net good for the world. It would actually be bad for the world if Christianity ceased to exist.
Maybe, maybe it would be, but I mean, how do you account for all of this horrendous activity? And I mean, like, it seems like people, when they get into power and church pastors, they just abuse it all over. They
Hmm.
like don't seem any better than cultish leaders.
Sure. This is what I'll say. I'll say, as a Christian, I'm not committed to the belief that we're all going to get it right. All I'm committed to is the fact that Jesus died for my sins, that he rose from the dead, and that if I put my faith and trust in him, that I'll go to heaven. But I believe that we live in a fallen world, that we are fallen creatures. We have a sinful nature by design. In fact, Jeremiah 17, this is a pretty crazy verse. It says that our hearts are deceitful above all else. Who should trust it? Who can trust the intentions of the heart? And the Bible also says that only God knows the intentions of the heart. And so, as a believer, I believe that we all actually have the capacity for evil within ourselves. And so I would encourage you, man, to even look within yourself and recognize that you have the capacity for evil as well, and that I also have the capacity for evil. And because of that, we need to always be on guard and make sure that we too don't fall into those similar problems, whether we believe in God or not.
Yeah, certainly, certainly. I mean, I'm not unaware of, like, yeah, my own struggles with evil or different things like that, or other people. But yeah, that's the point, right? Is like there's all of this church abuses, but especially, like, it seems like in religion, it's so prominent that,
Mm-hmm.
okay, so I thought religion was supposed to make you better.
Okay, well, let me ask you this. Do you think it's actually more prominent in religions, or do you think that maybe it's more scandalous in the church? Like when the church has these, child abuse scandals, don't you think that's just maybe more shocking than when, let's say, some random guy on the news kills his wife,
Yeah, no,
right?
exactly, right. But I think that's exactly the point, that it's so shocking that it's coming from this supposed to be godly person, right? Somebody who is close to God and stuff like that. But then they do all of these terrible things. So then why would I want to worship a God who has a whole bunch of infidels for servants?
Well, I would also say this. Let's think about the fact that the Bible doesn't ever claim that once we believe in him that we're going to get everything right. In fact, the Bible teaches that Jesus is the only sinless person. And so no matter who we are, none of us are Jesus Christ. And so we're all going to fall short of the glory of God. We're all going to sin. And so we're just not committed to the belief that we're going to be perfect after we give our life to Christ. We all sin. I still do. You still will if you give your life to God. Like,
But if God doesn't make any difference, then why would anyone want to be a part of it?
I wouldn't say it doesn't make any difference. I'm a totally different person than when I first got saved.
Really?
I have totally different habits. I have totally different ways of living and thinking about the world. Before I gave my life to Christ, I just used to do drugs and drink and party and all this stuff all the time. And nowadays, I don't do any of those things. And it's not because I'm just following a bunch of rules, but it's because God has changed me personally. And I, out of my love for God, I don't want to do those things anymore. So um, I would say that it's not that he doesn't make any difference, but it's just that some people are nominal Christians in the sense that they're only by name. Like they say they profess Jesus as Lord, but they don't actually walk that out. If we look in Galatians 5, the Bible talks about how there are the fruits of the flesh and the fruits of the spirit, and Jesus says the only way to produce fruits of the spirit are to abide in him. In John 15, he says this. And so let's
But
say I believe in Jesus, but I don't abide in Christ. I don't actually pursue him. I don't have a relationship with him, but I might have mental assent that he exists. I might go to church on Sunday, but I'm not actually doing the work, as a lot of people say. I'm not actually uh, praying. I'm not actually fasting. I'm not actually seeking God. Well, then I'm not actually going to produce the fruits of the Spirit, even though I might say that I'm a Christian. I might even be a pastor. I might even be a bishop. but if I'm not actively pursuing God all the time, I will not. It says it's impossible to produce the fruits of the spirit. So I would just say that anytime that happens, you are dealing with someone who has not been spending time with Jesus.
Okay, so you're actually saying though that God can actually change your life.
Yeah, absolutely.
So because what if I do? What if I do have all of these other dependencies and stuff like that that it just feels like I'll never be able to come out of them?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that that's a fair concern. I think that whenever I was trying to give my life to Christ, I was, concerned about because I'm a bit of a perfectionist. So I thought, is there any way that, I could really be a good person? Is there any way that I can give up all these habits and vices that I have? Um, but in reality, it ended up totally changing everything about my life. And it's only by the grace of God, though. That's the thing. And that's the beautiful part of it is that it's not even me, it's God changing me from the inside out. God is the one doing it, it's his spirit. The Bible says that when we believe in him, that his spirit comes to live in our hearts, our body's a temple. And um, when we meditate on that, when we 2 Corinthians 3 says that if we contemplate his glory and all of that, we are conformed into the same image of glory. And so he makes us more like him the more we meditate on him. And so I would argue that, God invented meditation in Joshua. He says, meditate on my law day and night, and you'll be successful wherever you go. Like meditation was originally from God but it
Mm.
was intended for us to meditate on him and not on, whatever most people meditate on these days. We're supposed to meditate on God, and that's what it's for.
Well, you've definitely given me some serious things to think about. Thanks.
Yeah, of course.
All right, let's move on from that. That was good. That was a good job, Nathan.
Thank you. I think this last one for you is going to be fun.
Miracles. Oh, the impossible.
Miracles. All right. I am the atheist
What
again.
did I do to myself? Why?
Okay, this should be fun because
Oh man.
I've had a lot of conversations. Like the real atheology guys.
Oh yeah.
I've gone back and forth
Oh
with a few of
yeah.
those guys and on this one. So um those guys are good. They're really nice. But
They are. They are. They're the nicer side of atheism, I'll just
yes,
say.
I agree.
So,
Okay, miracles. Let's do it.
all right.
So, okay, I hear you I hear you Christians talk about miracles and Jesus raising from the dead, but like I do
Yes.
not believe in miracles. We don't have any evidence for miracles. Why should I believe that the natural laws can ever be overcome?
Yeah. So this is a really big topic. So we'll have to see. Just stop me and hedge me in the direction you want to go as we go, because this is a really big topic.
Okay.
So the natural laws. Now, do you assume then that the universe is a closed system, that nothing outside of naturalism exists?
Well, yeah, I just think that we have a lot of evidence for like, let's say gravity. Like when I drop things, they fall to the ground, or when I
Mhm.
eat food, the laws of I don't know what.
Thermodynamics
Yeah,
and
they
stuff
just
like,
start working,
yeah.
and my calories start going in, and I have energy. And if I don't eat, I get tired. Um, and
Hmm.
I just have a lot of evidence and experiences with those things, and I've just never seen a miracle, and so I just don't see why I should believe that. And I think if there was an all-powerful God, he would just make himself more known in the world than he does.
Yeah, no, and I get that, right? And I think, a lot of us, we live off of our everyday experience, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, but now do you believe that miracles are impossible, or just that you've never seen one?
Well, I mean, I could argue that the testimony of a miracle should never be believed
Why?
because there's just so much overwhelming evidence in the opposite direction. Like I was saying, I have so much evidence that the law of gravity has never been overcome than I have that it has. So I don't see any reason to believe a testimony, especially when most people that believe in miracles, they're religious, and so they want to believe that their God is all powerful and could do such a thing. So I think most people just believe what they want to believe. And so if they are religious, they're going to want to believe that their God can interfere. So um But
But
as for
are
me, as someone who's not a believer, I don't have any inclination to do that. So
but
I'm
aren't
just
you
not.
saying that you're gonna just believe what you want to believe? So you're
Well,
not really that different from the Christians, right? Yeah, okay, they're believing for miracles and you've decided to believe against them.
well, I would say that I have reason to not believe them in the sense that we just have no evidence for them. But uh, Christians are, I think, believing them on blind faith, like the fact that Jesus rose from the dead. That doesn't happen. We've never seen people rise from the dead after 3 days of being dead. Like that just doesn't seem like that's even possible. Like how would his body even be preserved? Like how could his heart start beating again? How could his
Mhm.
like lungs start breathing after being dead for so long?
But people wrote about that, right?
Yeah, I
Okay,
would
so
just say
somebody
that they were
believed it.
lying.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And I get that, right? But now for you, um, you're just on the side of it's like, okay, there's no evidence for miracles, right? Is there any positive evidence that they're not possible?
Well, I mean, I think the biggest thing is people just want to believe that they're true, and then there's the the civilizations that have kind of attested for big miracles were kind of like prehistoric, like they weren't really modern. There's no like modern civilizations that are just being like, yeah, miracles happen all the time. it's it's typically like your older civilizations. There wasn't technology,
Mm-hmm.
there were no scientists back then to affirm them and to write them down and to calculate exactly how it happened. So I just think, it doesn't really make any sense to be committed to that belief when that's the case. It just seems to me that we have way more reason to believe that a testimony should be disbelieved than believed.
For miracles in particular, right?
Yeah, and also like all kinds of different religions claim that there are miracles. Like Muslims think that there were miracles,
Yeah, what's wrong with
and
that though?
I just think that it if God if the Christian God is true, which is what you believe, then
Mm-hmm.
why would the Muslim God produce miracles, or why would the Jewish God produce miracles? That just it seems to me that only the Christian God would produce miracles if he's the only one that exists.
I would say that the Christian God could produce miracles for any other person or even atheists. I don't see any reason for him to only limit miracles to one kind. Now, but maybe you're thinking that, well, but does he do it in the name of these other religions? That might be a different thing. And of course, I'll agree with you that I'll be skeptical about some acts or some supposed miracles and things
Mm-hmm.
like that. But
Okay.
how many miracles does it take for them to be miracles or for it to be possible? Just one, right?
Um.
As long as
Yeah.
one miracle is true, then therefore miracles do happen, right?
Okay. Yeah.
So if there's just needs to be one miracle, are you telling me that you are absolutely certain and aware that there are no miracles that have ever occurred in all of history?
Well, I mean, I can't say that with 100% certainty, but I can say that I haven't seen a miracle testimony that was completely trustworthy. Like it wasn't seen by enough people, or like I said earlier, it was
What would be
pre
enough people for
modern
you?
times. Um, that's a good question. I don't know, maybe like at least five.
What would it take for you to be convinced that a miracle did occur? What kind of evidence do you have to be provided?
Hmm. I think it would just have to be verified um, by reliable people, and I think that it would have to be documented and like shown that it could happen, and maybe even replicated in some way.
Replicated. That's a very interesting qualifier. Why would it have to be replicated?
I don't know, just prove that it's
Okay,
possible.
right. But when you say replicated, you are assuming then it's some sort of mechanism, right?
Well, that makes sense to me. Maybe there's some sort of law that we don't know of, like maybe every 200 years or something. Uh,
Okay, but then
the second law.
that's not really related to God then, right? Because God's a person, he's not a law.
Yeah, but it would just kind of be like some what if there's some unknown law that we don't know of, like what if there's some physical law out there that caused some one-off thing to happen, and there's no supernatural thing happening at all. It's just maybe there's every like 500 years something happens that's weird, and we just haven't seen it before because we haven't lived for 500 years, and so we can't confirm like, hey, that happened before. um so maybe there's just some hidden natural law that's happening, because I think that
Mhm.
in principle, even if there was a god, why would he overcome his own laws? Like, if doesn't he, the Bible say like he never changes his mind, so like why would he
Mhm.
create natural laws and then suspend them for some miracle? That just doesn't make sense to me. It seems like if he never changes his mind, that he would never suspend the laws of nature.
So I don't think he ever suspends the laws of nature, right? So the laws of nature are this idea that the universe works in a certain way or fashion, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but we assume, therefore, inside of that paradigm, that nothing is supervening on the universe from the outside,
Yeah.
right? So, in other words, the universe only functions in exactly the same way all of the time, as long as nobody reaches in from the outside. But
Yeah.
the laws of nature don't account for the idea that somebody could reach in from the outside. And so, therefore, it's not violating the laws of nature, it's merely reaching in from the outside. It's not adding something new. It does not like the laws changed. The laws are all still the same. The laws are only as such, though, that they will be the same if nobody reaches in from the outside.
So you're saying like, I'm technically going against the law of gravity right now by picking this up. You're saying God does something similar, like he can kind of just do what I'm doing except with other things.
Sure. You could do lots of things, right? So, like, let's even take the idea that matter is neither created nor destroyed, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's only according to the physical laws, right? But
Yeah, I
if
think that's the law of conservation, right?
yeah, the law of conservation, right? So, but if something was putting energy in from outside of the universe, then it wouldn't actually break the law of the universe. It would actually just be adding something from a different being outside of the universe.
Okay,
Now, I
but
know for
wouldn't
someone
that
who's, yeah,
okay.
so for someone who's very scientifically minded, the major difference is, do we assume that there is nothing outside of the universe? Or if there is something outside of the universe, how is that being able to interact with our universe?
Okay. So I think what you're saying makes sense in the fact that if there was a God, that maybe miracles would be possible, but I still just haven't ever seen one. I
Sure.
still just don't see any evidence for any miracles. So
Hmm.
why should I believe, even if they were possible, that there is a God performing them?
Yeah, yeah. No, this is a great question, right? So, one, I mean, I do think that it's important to recognize, okay, like you talked a little bit about before, like, oh, we just need 5 people to testify, right?
Yeah,
Now, this might be a little controversial, but essentially, how many people believe in God?
millions. I
Yeah,
don't,
and how
maybe
many
even
people
billions.
claim to have experiences with God, right?
Yeah, probably like hundreds of millions in the world.
Yeah. Okay. So there are theoretically hundreds of millions of people that claim to have miracles, right? Because they're having some sort of experience with something outside the universe.
Would they would experiencing God be considered a miracle, or would that just be, some subjective experience? A lot of psychologists say that you can produce religious experience with psychedelics and things like that. Like,
Mhm.
couldn't it just be like they're just having some weird experience in their brain, and it's not actually a miracle?
I guess it depends on what you mean by miracle. I guess, would you be a naturalist or would you?
Um, I'm kind of agnostic on that. I don't, I
Okay.
don't, I don't really know. There could be a higher power, and like I said earlier, there could, if there was a God, I assume there could be miracles. But
Mhm.
to me, I just don't see any reason to believe why they're there. I think there's, good evidence on both sides. Like you said, there's lots of religious people in the world, but there's also lots of atheists in the world that would say what I'm saying, that there's no evidence for them or whatever. So I just don't know which side to pick.
Yeah, that's understandable. So I would say that Yeah, I mean, if you actually are communing with someone outside, then that would be evidence for God. But like you mentioned before, it's like, well, but how do I know that it's really outside? Um,
Yeah.
Now, part of that, of course, would have to do with other accounts of miracles. So let's talk about like probabilities or chances, right? So we can think about maybe this will be a little too off fringe, but we'll give it a try.
Okay.
Um, I'll tell you one of the ones that blows my mind. I had a there was a young guy, and he was really torn up and conflicted concerning God. Okay.
Hmm.
And he had a very, very sick parent. Okay. Like death's door. They are in the
Okay.
hospital. They're going to perish.
Okay.
And they said, like, yeah, I mean, I really want to believe in God. I want to give into God and these sorts of things, but I just can't get over the fact, of that God did this to my family and all of this. Right. So they're
Okay.
just like, I'm just, no, this is a huge obstacle. And so some Christian brothers, they prayed for healing,
Okay.
and they got healed, complete
Hmm.
turnaround.
Hmm.
And now they were like all better. And when they went back to that person, like, hey, didn't you see, like, that's amazing, this is wonderful, now you, like, we can celebrate, we can worship God, we can glorify God for everything that he's done. And they were still like, yeah, but then they had new objections, and it was like,
Okay.
whoa, wait a minute. Like, what just happened? Now here's the thing, you could think of like, well, what a coincidence.
Yeah.
But I think that it starts to stretch things. If Christians pray for something, or somebody prays to God and it happens,
Yeah.
why should I think that it's a coincidence, overthinking that God actually did it? There seems to be
Hmm.
far less reason, or way less improbable, that, oh, you know what? Coincidences just seem to coordinate with my prayers.
Yeah.
Wouldn't
No,
you
I
agree that it
wouldn't.
seems more probable?
Yeah, I wouldn't. I wouldn't hold that perspective. I think that would be way too improbable to say that they prayed and then just some random thing happened. I think I would be inclined to agree with you. I've never seen a miracle.
Sure.
Like I've never heard of one. Like this is a cool story that you're telling me, but I guess I just don't know those people. Like how can I know that their
Mhm.
testimony is accurate or reliable?
Yeah, so one, of course, I would probably look and give you a book on miracles. There are actually several books that are talked about by various doctors, scientists, and stuff who have verified different accounts. There's a really neat one on YouTube. I can't remember the guy's name, but he had lost his voice,
Hmm.
and it's kind of neat because so he had some massive scar tissue, which had prevented him from speaking as much and had really caused him a lot of pain and frustration. And so they had actually, of course, been to the doctor, and you could see all this scar tissue in his throat. And so he gives this sermon where he had to speak for something, but he was really, really scratchy voice. And in the middle of his sermon, he's reading Psalms, I think, and it's talking about something. His voice comes back during the message.
Wow.
And so there's actually there's audio recording of it. You can hear it. And he actually kind of starts a little bit crying in the middle of the message, because he's like, what is going
Wow.
on? And then he talks about going back to the doctor, and all the scar tissue was gone. It had just
Wow.
vanished. So they had pictures before and after, and you actually get to hear the video where his voice comes back in the middle of it.
Wow.
So
Okay.
there are multiple accounts.
If you could send me that video or something, I'll definitely look at it. I agree. Like I said earlier, I'm open to the idea. I've just never seen one myself. So maybe if I saw one, I'd be more open to it.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, we find what we're looking for.
Yeah.
So I think if you go down and hunt around and look for miracles and other stories of miracles, you will certainly find a lot more stories. Yeah, many more than what I've presented here. So
Okay. Well, I mean, hey, I'll do that. Like I said, I've just never seen evidence for it. So I guess I should maybe look for some and see if I end up believing the testimony or if I just think there's something weird going on.
sounds good. All right, let's go.
All right. That was our four topics, but now we
Yep.
got one more. But this one we wanted to both be theists for the problem of evil because this is a fun topic. I think I actually did a debate on the existence of God like about a year ago. I think I was pretty new into apologetics, and this guy he was like, "Let's debate," and I was, kind of early on in my apologetics. I don't know if you would call it run
Career.
or walk or journey or yeah, career. Yeah, I'm a career apologist now. No, but maybe journey is the right word. And I was just like, yeah, why not? I'll debate someone. Like, we'll see how I do. And we probably spent the first 45 minutes on the problem of evil. And
Mhm.
I was not prepared. Like, if you find that debate, you're just going to be like, Nathan, what were you doing, man? But when we got to the arguments for God, I think I did good. Like, but it's a
Yep.
4 hour debate. So like
That's a long
if you
debate.
fast forward like 2 hours, you'll see I was doing pretty good. But I was not good at defending against the problem of evil. So I think this is going to be helpful because when I first started apologetics, I was good at like the arguments for Christianity, but I was not good at these, like the problems, like the critiques of it.
Mhm.
And so I think this is an important thing to get into just for people that are just getting into apologetics.
Yeah, yeah, and ultimately, this was one of the major arguments that really turned C.S. Lewis. It was my
Yeah.
understanding. In Mere
Mm-hmm.
Christianity, he talks about this, um, and so I studied apologetics for several years, and then I kind of took a step back for a while, just because I was doing other church stuff, ministry stuff, and so I just wasn't as in the weeds of arguing and debating and talking with lots of other atheists.
Sure.
Um, but so when I kind of came back and kind of came back to Twitter a little bit, I decided to like come back and like kind of basically see like, all right, well, what's changed? What's new? You know?
Yeah.
And I gotta be honest, I was kind of surprised. I didn't really feel like there was much nuance. I
Yeah.
know a lot of guys are talking about Graham Opie, you
Yeah.
know, and stuff like that. And I know that a lot of the atheists do believe and argue that are like, no, no, no. Well, this is better, and this is here, and there might be a few nuances, but I was
Yeah.
relatively surprised uh,
At like how little it had evolved or
at
something.
how little things had changed.
Mm-hmm.
And I was telling you just the other day, um, on this problem of evil, one of them were like, oh yeah, yeah, well, here's a paper, and the real atheology guys, one of the things I love is that they present papers and stuff like, oh, well, here's a paper written by so and so, here's a
Yep.
article. And so I really do shout out to you guys. Hey, we do
Yeah.
appreciate all of your stuff, because you are willing to talk about these subjects and
Oh
not
no,
just scream
they're
at us.
great. Yeah, they're great at giving actual papers. A lot of them are super long. Like I remember one they sent me was like 139 pages. It was like a
Yeah.
Google Doc and the print was like this tiny. And I was like, I read probably like 20 to 30 pages of it. And then I went scrolled like maybe 20 extra pages and I started reading again. I was like, this is too long. Like I have work to do, but
Yeah, but
no, they're
but
great.
yeah, and for the most part, yeah, I do often actually read the stuff that they said.
Oh
But so
yeah.
so they sent this one or whatever, and it was I believe it was a woman who made her argument, or she, PhD something or whatever, and yeah, the first few sentences were basically, yeah. So I'm not going to argue for the foundation of moral principles or whatever. So let's just talk about how we know what's right and wrong. And of course, I'm just like, that defeats the whole thing, right? That is the central argument for us as Christianity, is that we're like, what is your moral foundation?
Yeah, where does it come from?
Where
Like
does it
that
come
just
from?
dodges the whole question.
Yeah, yeah,
That's
yeah.
literally a dodge of the whole problem because we're saying like you can't ground morals, and she's like, all right, I'm not going to ground my morals, but let's just talk about this.
Yeah, yeah. No, and
Yeah.
actually, I also had that with another guy. Shout out to Bob. Me and Bob have been going back and forth for months now on
Okay.
just DMs on Twitter. And that was actually one of the first things we kind of talked about, was that Bob's like, well, we don't need to ground our morality. Let's just talk about what's right and wrong.
Mm,
And it's like, okay, like we kind of, I did argue a little bit like, what do you mean? Like, how can we talk about what's right and wrong?
yeah.
And so that's the first major problem of the problem of evil, is that for the theist, the Christian, we're just like the only way that we see reasonable and rational to ground morality as being objective. And because
Yeah.
now I want to make it clear, a lot of the atheists, they believe that morality is objective.
Yeah.
And our trouble is to go like, how? How
Yeah.
how do you how do you ground it? How do you
I
believe
think
that it's objective?
what I know what I believe Ben Watkins says is he says that basically he believes moral truths are necessary truths that are irreducible.
Mm-hmm.
And so things that are irreducible don't need an explanation. And so he kind of
Yeah.
goes the same route of they don't need an explanation either. But I think he is a little more thorough in trying to prove that they're irreducible truths and therefore they don't need a
Right.
grounding.
Yeah, they
Um,
want to ground them in something being very similar to like mathematical truths and logical truths, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
basically, they're necessary truths. Like, there's no possible world where it's okay to torture a little girl for fun,
Mm-hmm.
something like that. Like, they would say that's just a necessary part of reality. Evil is bad in itself, good is good in itself, pleasure is good in itself.
Mm-hmm.
And that's an irreducible truth. And
Yep.
therefore, we don't need to explain it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I mean, and kudos for them for kind of trying and stuff, but obviously, yeah, I don't find those answers satisfying.
Yeah, I don't
Um,
either. But and I have reasons for that, but I don't know if we have time to get into all of that. But
yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah,
But yeah, yeah. I'll just do like a short overview on kind of exactly what I just said there, and it would be the idea. I remember having one other conversation with another atheist on there, and they were very amiable. But yeah, we were talking about these ideas like, well, yeah, well, where do you get this idea of right or wrong from, right?
yeah,
And they're like, well, I just kind of believe it here and stuff, and I'm like, okay, well, how is, if you don't have a moral foundation, if you don't believe in any of these moral things, then how is what you're believing any different than two kids playing pretend? One says
yeah,
that he's Captain Hook and one says that he's Peter Pan, right?
yeah.
And they said, well, we can derive like our morals, and stuff like that. And I'm kind of like, okay, derive them from what? Like you
Mm,
said, you're getting them from somewhere,
yeah.
but it's like, from where? And let's
And we
just
don't
say
want to say it's
that's,
subjective. We don't want to say
yeah.
like, oh, it's just my opinion that it's wrong to do this or that. It's just my opinion that the Holocaust was evil. It's
Mhm.
like we want to be able to say like, no, that was really wrong. You shouldn't be able to do that. And so our contention as a theist is like you need to ground that in something. And if you're just grounding it in like some arbitrary Neoplatonistic
Yeah.
realm of necessary truths, I just don't know if that works. So that's kind of our contention, and that's why I think where you're going with this is like the answer to the problem of evil is God. Like, he is
Yeah.
the good, right?
Well, yeah, because like if you should do something, right? There's an ought, right? The good old Kantian ought.
Mm-hmm.
I ought to do this. Then there must be like an actual reason for that, right? There must be
Yeah.
an ought and ought not, those sorts of things. And if there's an ought, like there's a big difference between that which is and that which ought to be.
Yep.
And yeah, it just seems like without a grounding, without a foundation, without something that actually stands outside of all human beings, it's difficult to find any major solid reasons. I mean, I do think that the kind of, yeah, almost a Platonistic view of morality is the closest try. So I'm the
Yeah.
most sympathetic to that. And yeah,
Mm-hmm.
Watkins type of arguments, but
So what would you say to this then? Because I've gone that route. What you said, like evil can't exist without God, and I don't know which one of the guys on the team gave me this response, but he basically said that the problem of evil is simply an internal critique of Christianity, and because of that, I don't actually have to believe in objective morals to believe in the problem of evil. Like, they can be a moral anti-realist and a moral subjectivist and still put forward the problem of evil, and they just say it's simply an internal critique of your belief. It's not actually something I believe. Um, but they're saying if Christianity is true, then there's a lot of evil in the world. How do you ground that? Like, what's the issue with that? And so then this is where I think the evidentialist problem of evil comes in, and
mhm.
because we've gotten away from the logical side of it now, and we're saying like, okay, there's a lot of evil in the world. What's up with that? And usually what I say to that is that because I know that the guy I debated for like 4 hours on YouTube, his big thing was like, there's so much evil. And he had like this long list of things that he's memorized, like
Mhm.
millions of kids a year die from this disease. And like, why do flesh eating viruses and stuff exist? And why, like, just, he seems it's just like stuff that is so unnecessary. Uh, and different ways that animals die look so painful and stuff like that. Right. So,
Mhm.
um, and so basically, what I say is if we can answer the logical problem of evil, then the evidential problem loses a lot of its bite. And here's why I say this. Once we grant that evil is logically possible with the existence of God, each instance of evil, it doesn't actually add anything to the argument, if that makes sense. Like to
Mhm.
each successive incident of evil is actually not saying like, oh, here's an instance of evil that needs to be explained on God. Here's a second instance of evil that needs to be explained. It's not like they're not equal in like weight. It's not like 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1, and then you have billions and billions of evidences, so to speak, against God. But if it's logically possible, if there are good theodicies, which I think there are, that tell us why it's possible and why it's actually probably a necessary component of reality for evil to exist.
Mhm.
Given like storytelling theodicies or participation theodicies, things like this, and free will theodicies, and these types of things, given that evil was going to take place, then the evidential problem of evil loses a lot of its bite because each instance of evil is not its own argument for the problem of evil. And I think that's how they kind of take the evidential problem
Mhm.
of evil. They think each instance of evil, that one
It's
needs to be
stacking up.
explained.
It's
Yeah,
stacking up
like,
like, yeah, more.
and it's like, then now that one needs to be explained. Now this one needs to be explained. Now this one needs to be explained. But I think once we prove logically that the problem of evil, like evil is going to exist, I think the evidential side of it loses a lot of its bite because you can't stack them up like that. Once it's proven to be possible, yeah, there's evil. There's probably a lot of it. This world is big. There's lots of people. There's lots of animals. There's lots of things that go wrong. There's lots of things that go right. Life is complicated. And so that would be kind of where I would go with that. What were your thoughts when I was talking about the idea that it's just an internal critique of Christianity? There's a lot of evil in the world. How do you explain that? They might say, I don't believe in that morals are objective. I think morals are subjective. But if Christianity is true, then morals are objective, and
Mhm.
that's a problem. Uh, but there's a lot of evil. What's up with that? Like, what would you
Mhm.
say to that?
I think that the question that has to be answered is what is the purpose? What is
Mm-hmm.
the purpose of life? And what is the purpose inside of Christianity? So to me, honestly, even so, like going back to just a an atheist perspective or somebody else who's going to defend it, my question is this: like, how do you have good and evil without purpose? Like, you
Mm-hmm.
want to, if you want to say this is wrong, okay, cool. Well, like good and evil seem to be intrinsically tied to purpose and meaning. Like if there
Yep.
is no good and evil, there is no purpose and meaning.
Yep.
And
I
so
agree
it's
with that.
like, okay, what is the purpose and meaning? You know? And so I think that this is only really an argument against Christianity if the argument is that Christianity believes that the universe is supposed to be perfect and good and not have any evil in it. Like that there should be no capacity for it. But I don't think that it
Yeah. And I think that's what a lot of them argue. They say, like, if there's a perfectly good being and a perfectly powerful being and a
Mhm.
perfectly, it's like three of them. It's like perfectly good, perfectly
All knowing and
knowing,
all powerful. Yeah.
all powerful.
Yeah.
Why doesn't he stop evil?
Omnibenevolent, omnipotent, and omniscient.
And
Yeah,
there's some
those are
like
the
there's like a contradiction there supposedly. I don't think
yeah.
there is, and it's exactly for what you just said, that suffering actually produces meaning in the world. Like, what are we doing apologetics for? We're trying to stop we're trying to stop bad thinking because we think bad thinking is bad, and we're trying to help
Mhm.
people come to Jesus because we think that's a good for the world. As inspiring philosophy keeps pointing out, that there are lots of papers showing that Christianity is a net good for the world,
Yeah.
and so it's actually good for people to become Christian. And so we're actually getting rid of evil in the world by converting people to Christianity. And so that's a part of the purpose of our life. And if if God didn't exist, there wouldn't be a purpose. Like it would just be,
Well,
I'm suffering for no reason.
well, no, and so exactly that last part. I think this is one of the most crucial parts is that like as apologists in many ways or whatever talking about evil, we're not here to discredit evil. We're not here to wash away evil or sweep it under the door. We're here to give meaning and purpose to it.
Yeah.
Because I think the worst part is to have evil and suffering and pain and depression and all of these horrible things for no reason at all.
Yeah.
That's
No, that's
that's the
true.
true travesty. And that's part that I don't understand on their view. So like let's say we
Mm,
take somebody else's view and then we look at it compared to the Christian view. It's like, okay, so there's all of this evil in the world. Let's just accept that as a fact. There
sure.
is lots and lots of evil in the world, okay?
Yeah.
And it's like on atheist, there's lots of evil in the world and it has no meaning or purpose.
Yeah.
On Christianity, though, it has a purpose, it has reason and meaning behind it. And that's what I think is really better articulated is like there is evil in the world, there is suffering. And I think, of course, one of the greatest things in the entire world is that Jesus comes to earth to
Yeah.
suffer with us, right? And of course, according to a Trinitarian view, God comes to suffer with us. This is the only God who comes down to earth to suffer with us, to resonate with us, to understand our pain and misery, and to commiserate with us. Like there isn't any other faith that I'm aware of that God resonates with mankind, endures our suffering and pain, and
Hmm.
then says like, he's not just so far off and just removed from humanity. He dies and suffers with us.
One of my favorite verses in the whole Bible is Deuteronomy chapter 20, verse 4. It says, "The Lord your God goes with you and before you to fight against your enemies to give you the victory." And
Mm,
literally, that's embodied in Jesus. He lived 2,000 years ago. He fought our enemies. It says he was tempted in every way in the
mhm,
Bible. He faced death on our behalf, and not even just death, the most painful way to die that's ever been manufactured, right? Like this is the Romans had perfected crucifixion to where it was as
mhm.
painful as possible. And he died in our place, faced death, the thing that we're all afraid of. It's like the top one or two biggest fears is death, and public speaking is another one. Um,
Yeah.
but that just shows how hard public speaking is. But death is always in the top two as well. And so he faced the thing that mankind fears most, basically. And that is the gospel story. And, I know a lot of atheists are skeptical or don't like a lot of Frank Turek's work, but there is one thing he says that I think we can all agree on as Christians, and that he says the answer to the problem of evil is the gospel.
Mhm.
And I believe that with all my heart, that the incarnate word of God that entered into flesh, died for our sin and rose again, is he gives purpose to suffering. He gives meaning to suffering. And even Viktor Frankl, he's a survivor of the Holocaust, and
Mhm.
he said that the biggest thing of suffering is we have to find meaning in it. And I'm not even sure if he was a Christian or not, but I think that that's true. In suffering, we have to find meaning, and we shouldn't just suffer for no reason. And I think, like you
Mhm.
said, the only way to do that is to find the purpose within the gospel of Jesus Christ.
I remember this coming up one time when we were confronted with a very real situation in which a young person literally had their parents murdered in front of them, right?
Wow.
And and then it's the question is like, yeah, like how can I, you know, minister to them? How can I, say that our God exists when this horrible thing happens to them?
Yeah.
But I just think about these in terms of what about the alternative? It's like on atheism with no God, what hope is there? What
Mm,
hope is there? Who,
yeah.
what Jesus is there? There is no Jesus. There is no God. There is none of this and stuff. But with on Christianity or whatever, we have a God who can redeem her, who can be there for her, who can be there with her. And one of the biggest things that I think is so interesting is that whether it's good times or bad times, so often the thing that makes the trip is who you're with,
Mm,
right?
Yep.
Like all of us have been through crappy times with a good friend that totally made it bearable.
Yep.
Right. I mean, I'll never forget one time, I forget which state we were in, but it was a youth trip and we had a school bus to haul all of us down and stuff. And it's
Mhm.
like seriously like 80, 90 degrees. It's super hot, super sticky. There is no AC in this bus. Okay. This is, the bus with the windows
Old school
down,
yellow bus.
right?
Yeah.
And we break down on the side of the
Yeah.
road
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
for hours. But it
Oh
was it
man.
was really, really memorable and fun because of who I was with, right?
Yeah.
Because of who I was with. Yeah, that could have been a horrible trip, but we ended up having a good time, even though, yeah, it was the middle of the night too. It's dark, it's hot, it's sticky, like everything is wrong with this trip, but it ended up being really cool because who was there.
Hmm.
So,
And I'm reminded of one of my favorite quotes from Fyodor Dostoevsky, and the one of the things he said was, "There's only one thing that I fear, and that's to not be worthy of my suffering." And
mm,
I think that that's such a powerful thing to say when we really kind of try to wrap our minds around what that means. That, as we've been talking about, like whether it's by being around people that are good, or whether it's about finding meaning within the gospel or finding meaning in Christianity, that gives us meaning in our suffering, and that allows us to be worthy of our suffering. And the Bible tells us that the whole in Philippians 1:6, he says, "I'm confident in this, that one who began a good work and you will bring it forth to completion." And
mhm,
what work is he talking about? It's when you come to Jesus, the beginning of sanctification begins. It's the process that begins within your heart that wants to make you more like Christ. And whenever that work is began, he's saying, "I promise you, I'm going to finish this. Just walk with me." And
yeah,
whenever you recognize that there's going to be suffering along the way, John 16, Jesus says, "In this world, you will have tribulation." It's a
mhm,
promise on Christianity. And like we said on atheism, I just can't make sense of it. It's like, but in Christianity, it's like, you are going to have problems. You are going to have trials. You're going to have tribulation. It's a promise. It's a guarantee. And I want to be worthy of my suffering by finding purpose in it, and by walking with God to kind of bring in your point, like the people you're with and who you're with along the way. That's how we can be worthy of our suffering.
and so I think that one of the major things is that there are so many people that have actually come to Christ through suffering and through
Yeah.
pain. And you know what? I think that's one of the major things that people don't get sometimes. And like, well, yeah, what is the meaning of suffering? Why is there so much suffering? And I
Yeah.
think actually William Lane Craig has explained this well, that this life is not for us to just live happy and perfect and everything like this. The purpose of it is for us to come to know God, to come into a personal relationship with him, not to
Yep.
just believe that he exists, but to actually walk with him, talk with him. And I'll never forget this one inmate. He had gotten saved in prison. And, some of the guys were ministering to him and talking to him and everything like that. And they're like, "What can we pray for you for?" And he said, "Please pray for my family, because while I'm in here, the truth is I'm free. They're still locked in jail,
Mhm.
right? They're still stuck in prison because they haven't seen Christ. They haven't, had their lives changed by God."
That
And
reminds me of
that was his
Paul.
prayer. So,
That reminds me of Paul in the Bible. He wrote so much of the New Testament while in prison, like
mhm.
Philippians, he wrote in jail. And that's one of like the coolest books of the Bible, right? He's just like, "I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me." And he said that while he's in jail. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
that's such an empowering thing to think about, that in suffering, we can have hope.
Right, right. Well, you know what? That's the funny thing, right? I hear that verse all the time. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Now I'm going to go run a marathon, right?
Oh,
But
yeah.
but really, Paul's major point here is like, I can endure suffering. That's his
Oh,
point. Is
yeah.
I can do I can do
Read verse
all
12.
suffering through
Read verse
Christ.
12.
Yeah.
Verse 12 says, "I know what it means to lack. I know what it means to have abundance. I know what it means to like go through this life basically, and to have and to have not, but I can do all things through Christ." He's literally saying that I can get through the good and the bad times because I have Jesus. Like, I say that on the radio all the time, by the way. I'm like, please stop saying Philippians 4:13 is just like a, I could do anything. Like, if you really believe that, you would like walk off your roof and start flying to work tomorrow to avoid traffic. Like, you don't really believe you can do everything, right? But all things that you can do are because of Christ. That is true.
Mhm.
Jesus says you can do nothing apart from me in John 15. So you might not can do everything, but you can do nothing apart from him.
Yep. Yep. Well, Nathan, thank you so much for coming on today. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah, dude,
And
that was good.
Nathan is starting his own YouTube channel. Have you launched? You've actually launched the first video public, right?
Yeah, I posted first video yesterday, why apologetics, and that was very fun. And I've got lots more to come. I've already got two more filmed, and one of them's edited. The other one is being edited as we speak. And then I've got two more video ideas. I've already prepared a presentation for one, and then I'm been preparing for the other one for about 2 or 3 weeks because it's a big topic, defending sola scriptura. So if you guys are watching this like a year from now or something, that video is going to be good. I think I've been preparing a long time for it.
There you go. There you go. So yeah, if you want to catch Nathan, you catch him on his YouTube channel, and I'll have the links in the description below. So thanks so much, Nathan, and look forward to doing some more work with you later.
Yeah, before you hit stop, man, I just want to say thank you for having me. You guys should follow Adam on Twitter and definitely subscribe to his YouTube channel if you haven't already. He's a great guy. So thanks for having me, man.
All right, thanks, Nathan.
Thanks so much for watching this rather long episode of The Epitome. I hope you enjoyed it. If you stayed tuned for this long, make sure you leave a thumbs up. Comment down below what you thought about this idea. If you want to see us collaborate again and maybe try something new, let us know in the comment section down below. Subscribe if you want to see more content like this. This has been The Epitome. I'm your host, Nathan Bozeman. We'll see you around.